Hi, and welcome to another interview through MMAC. Today we have Jerod Peitsmeyer, who is the Henry Malloy Curatorial Intern. He's a grad student, a dad, he's working left and right, and he's very valuable to the team at MMAC. So Jerod, first question, how'd you start at MMAC?
Yeah, well, I did my undergraduate work here at the university with a focus in art history, and so I had a working relationship with Dr. Chacon, as well as Valerie Hedquist. So I was always kind of tertiarily involved in things that were sort of related to the museum, and found myself interested in many of the objects that were in the collection. And then when Raphael took the museum over and became the director, one of sort of the pressing issues was what to do with the Henry Malloy collection that had been kind of in the care of the museum for the last 30 or so years, but had gone somewhat uncatalogued and unresearched. And so he proposed to the Meloy Educational Trust a position for me to first catalog all the works, which are somewhere around 3,500, I believe, which includes ceramics, drawings, and paintings. And then secondarily, hopefully, maybe there'll be another aspect of the project, which will be to kind of do some more curatorial work and possibly create some exhibition literature and maybe an exhibition at some point as well.
Very cool. So who is Henry Malloy, and why is it significant that the museum has all of these works in its possession?
Yeah, so Henry Malloy, and again, I want to stress they are still owned by the Malloy Educational Trust. We just sort of are in care of them and are trying to steward them in the best way we can.
Gotcha.
But the works are important because Henry Malloy is a Montana artist. He was born in 1902 in Townsend, which is near Helena, Montana. And throughout his life, he basically found himself becoming more and more ensconced in the art world up until the point where in the 20s, he was living in New York City and was friends with many of the most influential and well-known artists in the country, including Jackson Pollock and William de Kooning. He also was involved in the WPA project as well, and has a mural that was installed in the 1940s in the Hamilton Post Office. So he's got some kind of really notable, I guess, instances in art history that are important. They're also important to Montana. And he has a few works that are in some very famous museums. For instance, he has two works in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. And he really, I think his importance is that he represents a working artist in the first half of the 20th century. And so we can look at his work and see illustration, we can see his dabblings in cubism, his dabblings in modernism. Really, he was able as an expert draftsman to really kind of move in and out of any genre he wanted to, and make a living at doing it. And so I think he's an important artist for us to look at in terms of somebody that was working kind of under the radar, being very famous, but able to make a career at it.
Yeah, definitely. No, I've seen a few of his things. Can you show me some of his things?
Yeah, let's start here. This is a work. Let me get my screen share on.
Sure thing. So how many objects are there in this collection?
There are about 3,500, I believe.
Oh, geez. So you really got your work cut out for you, huh?
Yes, it's a lot of work. Are you able to see that?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so that's an illustration that he did, I believe, when he was 12 years old. That's what it says on the back, anyways. And from a very early age, his parents kind of noticed these skills and were able to usher him into more and more artistic training. He ended up in 1940 getting a job at Columbia University and training students to paint and draw. And while he was doing that, as I've seen as evidenced in the collection that we have here, he continued to work and hone his skills as well. Let me show you a number of his other works so you can see kind of the range that he has. This is a small self-portrait that I found kind of written on the back of a letter.
You'll have to update your image.
Update it in...
I'm still looking at the 12-year-old.
Gotcha.
But so talk me through your your process of cataloging these and registering them as well.
Yeah, it's a rather tedious process. Are you able to see that new image there?
Yeah, that's great.
Oh,
Thank
great. That's a little self-portrait I found. I believe it looks like he's probably in his New York apartment,
you.
looking in a mirror. Just I found it to be a charming, like very personal little work that he did there, as well as being artistically wonderful. But yeah, the work is rather it's rather cumbersome and tedious. Essentially, what I have to do is take each work, photograph it, download the work into the computer, edit the photo, and then put the photo into a museum database that we have, which includes assigning it a number, measuring it, basically entering all the attributes that the work might have, including details about the medium or the process. And all of that, I would say for each work takes anywhere from 8 to 15 minutes, depending on sort of what happens. So multiply that times 3,500 and you can kind of figure out how long that might take there. Let me get back to another image here just to give you a range. This was some of his later work. Are you able to see that one?
Yeah, that's great. Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, so in his late work, he dabbled in abstraction. He really was sort of able, as I've looked through the works, to find his hand in almost any genre that you can imagine. He did a lot of caricatures as well, which I'll show you now. You see those?
Yeah.
And so it's fun to go through the works and sort of spend sometimes what will be weeks and weeks looking at his representations of the body, and then all of a sudden spend a few days looking at caricatures, or a few days looking at horses. And so, yeah, that's really the work right now. It's just a matter of registering it, getting it into the system, getting those images nice, so that they can be looked at on our collection website, as well as possibly sharing them with some other institutions in Montana as well.
Yeah, that's very cool. How would you describe Henry Malloy as a Montana artist? Would you describe him as a Montana artist?
That's a great question. He has a lot of work that is kind of Montana themed. So there are, and I guess I did not include any of those in here in these images, but he did paint and draw a lot of horses, a lot of cowboy scenes, specifically in his illustration works. The question is interesting because he is from Montana and did spend his childhood here, but he spent like the bulk of his career in New York. He did travel back and forth to Montana, and so I would consider him a Montana artist, but I think the question is one that involves a lot of nuance. I wouldn't necessarily call him a New York artist either. So it's sort of one of those questions I don't know the exact answer to. I think it's important to locate him as a Montana artist in some regard, because that is where he was from. And in his early work that I've seen, it seems as though those cowboy scenes and those horse scenes kind of greatly informed his art. And then his probably his most famous work is in the Hamilton post office as well. Mm-hmm. So I think that does kind of give him that kind of those sort of credentials as being a Montana artist. But his work isn't entirely focused on what we traditionally would think of as Montana themes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So what have you learned, I guess, while doing your internship? Has there anything striking from Henry Malloy himself, or maybe about the process you're working on, MMAC as a whole, how it compares to other museums, if you've had experience with other museums?
Yeah, I would say my learning is twofold. On the one hand, I'm also a studio artist. So on the one hand, as I'm looking at his work, I'm seeing just the sheer volume of work that he did. And I feel like I'm able to sort of see his hand sort of get more and more agile and more able to draw things quickly and draw things with, or paint things sort of with speed and elegance. And you can almost see that as a practice as you look at volumes and volumes and volumes of these things, specifically when I'm able to compare the early work to the late work.
Mhm.
In terms of curatorially, I certainly, it's opened my eyes to sort of the amount of work and the detail that needs to go into cataloging a collection that's so large and so voluminous. I think it's really helped me kind of understand the process in terms of what goes into um, keeping a work well stewarded. You know, when you go into a museum and you see something hanging on a wall as a patron or as a viewer, there it is, right? And there's some
Mhm.
text, but there's a lot of work that goes into it prior to that. And so I think it's given me a new appreciation for the inner workings of probably what occurs at most, if not all, American museums.
Mhm. Have you done any I guess official curating? Have you designed a show?
I have not yet, and I hope to at some point. I think that would be wonderful to do.
Mhm.
I am I'm focused on another object in my thesis that at some point, hopefully, I will be able to kind of, you know, dovetail the two of those practices together.
Yeah, we'll have a second interview where we talk just about that, because that Greek amphora that you're working on is amazing to have in the collection.
It really is, yeah.
So you've mentioned, so you're a painter, is that what you said?
Yeah,
Or
primarily a sculptor and a painter, but I primarily have been working on painting of late.
all right, very cool. I don't know, do you have anything you want to show off while I've got you?
You know what? I think
You can say
that
no, that's okay.
no, I'd be happy to. I just don't think that I've got any of those on my computer at the moment. They're all on my phone. Oh, maybe here's one. Let's see. Let's do a screenshot. This is actually a. Let's see if I can share this. Are you able to see that?
Oh yeah, wow, that is cool.
Yeah.
Uh,
So that's a. I'm actually kind of heading up an artist series label project for a local brewery, Imagination Brewing.
mhm.
And this is the first of the series. That's a small painting that I did. It's not necessarily indicative of all the work I do. Uh,
Mhm.
but anyways, I'll be creating a call to artists to try to come up with 4 or 5 artists to create these labels. But that's a small one of my works there.
There we go. So working with Imagination Brewing, huh? That's very cool. So
Yeah.
how do you see art, I guess in MMAC as a whole, kind of extending beyond its physical parameters, and how does it influence the community?
I
Or,
think that art is, you know, there's a lot of mystification surrounding art and museums and sort of the, you know, a lot of people have different ideas of what art is, right? But I think that art is, and as I study it as an art historian, as I work on it with my thesis and the courses that I've assisted with in teaching, I realized that art is really just a physical manifestation of culture, community, and society. It's a way for us to examine sort of what's going on in the different stratifications of our world throughout history and currently. And I think that, you know, the more that a museum like the Montana Museum of Art and Culture can get these objects into public access and into public view, and get conversations out regarding these objects, and not just about their history, but about what they mean to us now. I think that there is a really wonderful venue to be that could potentially exist where communities can come together and have social discourse, not just about the specific object, but about like our lives and our world in general, kind of using the objects as almost an icebreaker, if you will, or a talking point to start these larger conversations.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of the I don't know, I had a high school teacher. One of his favorite sayings was, "The more things change, the more things change. The more things stay the same." Um,
Right.
I know, and so what you said kind of got me thinking about like the French salons, right? You know, they were rooms full of art where distinguished people came and talked about it, which is very cool. That going back to your imagination label, that you're able to get in on that, and then, you know, someone will see the can, they'll go, oh hey, what's that, and then maybe they'll learn about you, right? There may be a little something like that. So you're doing so your thesis, right? You're doing a master's degree in art history, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So how do you see that, or how much longer do you have until you have that degree, and then what do you plan on doing with it?
I'm hoping to have my thesis wrapped up by the end of next semester, so fall of 2021. We'll see if that ends up being the case. It may end up extending beyond that, depending on the scope of the thesis. Beyond that, I would like to pursue my PhD in art history. I would love to teach at the university level. And I would also love to do research. I love research and kind of like I'm doing with my thesis, it becomes almost like a detective job where you're, trying to uncover more details that haven't been uncovered before or that have been lost, and help create these news stories that are relevant based on old facts or based on forgotten facts. And so ideally I'd be able to both teach and do research on art
Yeah, there you go. The university professor's dream.
right.
Exactly. Well, that's very cool. That's kind of, I don't know, somewhat what I want to do as well.
Awesome.
That's interesting to talk to you about it. Yeah. So next thing. So working at MMAC, right? How has that kind of prepared you for a career path in that? Right.
Yeah, man, it's given me, a view into museum workings, into collection workings, and I think, I spent 10 years in the wine business, or maybe 12, and by the time I was out of the wine business, I had experienced it from so many different angles that I've, from production to shipping to winemaking to retail to restaurant work, and so having seen all those aspects, by the end of it helped me realize that any aspect you can see of a particular genre or a particular field can kind of help you inform maybe the singular one that you're most interested in. So I may end up in museum work at some point. I don't really know, and I don't try to put a definite path on where I'll end up, but being able to see into that world and sort of see what curators are looking at, what museum directors are interested in, what patrons are interested in, how museums are beholden to patrons or not beholden to patrons, and sort of what are the limits and bounds of a regional museum like ours versus, say, a national museum, and trying to it's really helped me to kind of understand sort of some of the parameters of one of the institutions of art. And I think that's important, especially when I'm talking to students or doing my own research and trying to talk about like what is a museum. Well, it's easy to sort of say what it is based on what people think it is or what's written, but to actually have that firsthand knowledge, I think, is really important.
So you teach as well, or you do a little bit?
Yeah, there's an online art history course that Dr. Valerie Hedquist and I developed 2 or 3 years ago, and I think this is my 6th semester of assisting with it. And so that's also been helpful in kind of seeing what teacher-student relations are in terms of art and art history.
Yeah, tell me more about that. How I don't know, what do you think of the online format, especially with an art with I know Raphael has told me, or Dr. Chacon has told me about a site-specific class that he's done. You've probably taken it. And when COVID was first coming around, he expressed his concern about how that was going to work. So how have you worked around that?
At first, when the School of Art was needing this course to be developed, and they brought it to Dr. Hedquist, she and I were talking about it, and we both kind of are steeped in an older school philosophy about art history, which is face-to-face, site-specific. But we saw the opportunity to maybe do something different and be more inventive. And so we changed the Introduction to Art History course to really be focused on online interaction. And I think there are many wonderful auspices of online learning. And I think a few of them are that you can reach more people. We have people in those courses that are not at the University of Montana proper. They're offsite, they're in different cities. Ideally, at some point, the course could reach people, stationed overseas on military vessels, potentially people that are incarcerated. It gives you an option to really reach people that might not be able to make it in a face-to-face setting. And then, of course, in light of COVID, it has really allowed us to keep the the discourse of art and art history going, wherein the last few semesters, that would have been tough with large amounts of people. You can have as many people as you can find or can get enrolled in an online course.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's been challenging over those 6 semesters. We continue to tweak it. We continue to find new ways to try to engage students and new methods of responding and interacting. But I do think that, in a world where, you're in a pandemic, or in a world where, in-person enrollment may be changing and becoming less and less a factor of what the university is looking at, I think the online portal is important.
Yeah, I agree, because I mean, I remember I took those 2 intro classes in person with Valerie,
Yeah.
Which was a blast. But then my partner took them online, so it was interesting to see her experience versus mine, right? And how,
Right.
yeah, it was kind of a, I don't know how to describe it, but online, I agree. In person is a little more intimate, a little more um, informational. But online has its merits, and especially in today's day and age, you kind of need it. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I certainly do think there are elements that are lost in an online presentation, and I lament those all the time.
oh
But
yeah,
when we're able to still reach people and still have these conversations, I think that's also valid as well.
yeah. Just so you're saying just having the conversation is better than nothing at all.
Yeah, essentially, and I think, specifically with some of those introductory level courses, I think that you have the opportunity through online that you may not get somebody enrolled in a face-to-face class that might be willing to do it online, and maybe out of 100 students, maybe you reach a few of those that then become more interested in art history and find themselves 2 or 3 years down the road in upper division courses, or heading into graduate school,
Absolutely.
and finding some lost or forgotten object that needs to be researched.
There you go. Yeah, such as yours truly.
Right.
Yeah. So, what other forays into teaching have you had?
Trying to think if there are any other than that course. I think it's all been related to that Art 150 Intro to Art History course. When I was in the wine business, I developed and taught multiple and years worth of employee training about wine. So I had kind of a long experience doing that as well.
There you go. That's that. It's interesting that you were in the wine business, because I feel like, I don't know, the romanticized vision of art history is, people getting together, drinking a little bit of wine together, and talking about stuff. So that's kind of a funny little connection that you have there. That's very cool. I liked you kind of comparing the different parameters, right? Saying like of the museum versus the wine business, and I do agree. I feel like if you're in something long enough, right, you kind of get the ins and outs, especially with some like a place like MMAC, where, I mean, you not only are you the curatorial intern researching and cataloging, right, but you're also, working on your online class through the School of Art. And, with something like a regional museum, like MMAC is, right, you kind of need to, I don't know, be a jack of all trades, if you will.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you have any other roles in MMAC other than curatorial intern and thesis student or master's student?
Not officially. I do occasionally help out with other needs that need to go on, but that's kind of my official duty. And it's there's not much more time that I could. I mean, there's not enough time to even get that job done in the time I'd like to do it. It's so much work. So.
Well, fair enough. Well, we're closing up on time here pretty soon. Do you have any final thoughts to say about MMAC, say about your projects, say about Henry Malloy? What, the floor is open.
Yeah, I've been really fortunate and blessed to be able to work on this project and to look at these works of this important artist, and to sort of be a part of hopefully what will become, one of the cornerstones of what people may come to the new museum, hopefully when that gets built, to see, maybe some of his works are always on view in the permanent collection, or a selection of them are rotating, and so on and so forth. And you know, there may be someone out there that has looked at the Henry Malloy works at the Met in New York or at the Yellowstone Museum and has taken an interest in them and wants to come to our museum and look at, you know, the ones that are here. And so kind of being a part of that, not even knowing sort of, you know, what my role will eventually be or, you know, what importance that may play is exciting. And I feel fortunate to have seen that side of it.
Yeah, I agree. The new building's very exciting. I mean, just having all the artwork all under one roof is going to be great.
Absolutely.
I know I've helped Jeremy and Raphael move some stuff around. It's, oh gosh, going to one building and another, and
Right.
anyway, but I digress. Well, thank you, Jerod. For those of you watching, keep in touch. We'll have a second one with Jerod about his master's thesis. Make sure not to miss that. Jerod, thank you again, and take care.
Yeah, thank you so much.